All right, so far we've talked about arrogance and
So maybe I should
facade.
write these down one at a time. So there was arrogance and facade. Yeah. Or which we called the false ego.
Yeah.
Yep.
What would be next on your list?
Well, there's so many, isn't there?
Yes,
It's like-
I have one on the list that
yeah,
we can
sure.
bring up. Judgment and criticism,
Okay.
which I think is an interesting one that perhaps we don't always associate with the lack of humility.
Is there an E in there? Probably not.
Yes. Oh, no, there's not. See, I can't spell either.
Both you and I have.
Maybe depends what continent you live on as well.
Yeah. Judgment and criticism. Yeah. Yeah, these are very similar to arrogance, actually, in a lot of ways.
How would you define judgment for us?
Well, again, judgment is an emotion that's coming out of me. So we know it's not anything to do with what I'm saying. I can be telling the truth in a loving way, or I can tell the truth in a judgmental way. So if it's in a judgmental way, I have an emotion coming out of me towards the other person that I am superior to them, that I know better than they do, and so forth when I'm in a judgmental way. And in fact, judgment is a lot about worth, my opinion of the other person's worth. So when I am in a state where I am judging, I have a strong opinion inside of myself that I am more worthy than the other person.
Yeah.
And it might be on just a particular issue, but it could be on a whole group of issues. And sometimes it's on a group, where I believe that it's everything to do with my being is more worthy than somebody else's. Now, it's an emotion where that is a projection at the other person, which is quite a damaging projection. It's belittling, condescending. It causes us to have an obnoxious viewpoint towards other people. It creates a sense in them that they are lesser, or it attempts to create a sense in another person that they are lesser than I am. And it allows me to maintain a sense of personal superiority. So in other words, I by judging you, I can maintain a sense that I'm better than you. And judgment, of course, has huge problems when it comes to humility, of course. So that's certainly the case. Criticism is closely aligned in that many times and again, we've got to be careful. Criticism is an emotion. It's not a statement. So you see, if I can make a statement of truth, right? The statement of truth can be, completely, like, for example, do you like these flowers? And my feeling is, yeah, I love those flowers. A lot of them look like Australian natives, and many of them appeal to me colour-wise and everything. Are they dying? Yes, they are dying. They've been cut and they're dying, right? And I don't understand why people want to cut flowers because they immediately begin dying, honestly. So I'd much rather see them alive for a long period of time. Now, my statement that they're dying is not a judgment or a criticism. It is just a statement of truth. It is dying. And but somebody could take that to be a statement of judgment or criticism. So in other words, if they gave me the flowers and they were a nice bright bunch and I said, you've given me a heap of dying things now, right, which is a statement of truth, they might take that as a rejection of their gift, right, which they've now taken as a criticism, even though I don't mean it to be such. It's just a statement of truth. So it depends upon the giver, and this is where it's very, very difficult for most people to determine judgment and criticism, because most people feel criticised or judged even when you're just stating the truth.
Yes.
So this is not what I'm speaking of. I'm not speaking of when we're just stating the truth without any emotional intention behind it. What I'm speaking of with judgment and criticism is a desire to make the other person feel something as a result of the statement.
Yes.
Right? which is a very different condition. If I just saying, oh, they're dying, and it's just a statement of truth, well, that's a statement of truth. But if I'm saying, I'm pointing out to you that they're dying because I want to criticise that you cut them, right? And I want to actually make you feel bad about cutting them, right? Rather than just examine the truth about why you cut them, then I'm straight away now involved in a feeling of judgment from myself, and it's a feeling that comes out of me. And unfortunately, most people are not very sensitive to feelings, and so they don't know when the feeling is coming out of a person when they're just stating the truth.
Yes.
Right. So this is sort of muddies the waters a bit when it comes to this emotion.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it feels like you can have what appears to be a subtle exchange with someone that can be laden with judgment, can't it? It can be overt, or it can be very underhanded, but in both cases I'm assuming you're talking about the emotion that's coming in.
Yes, we see the underhanded judgments very much occurring in families, but also in society, these underhanded judgments. So for example, we've had many things written about us right now, and one of the judgments is that we're a cult, right? Now, it's not a statement of truth, for example. You and I don't lead anything. We live in our own property. We don't have anybody living with us. We don't monitor anybody's life to see whether they're practicing the principles of divine truth that we teach. We don't attack them if they aren't. We don't give them all of this, lovely feelings when they are.
We don't threaten them.
We don't threaten them with the removal of our love. The only times that we remove ourselves from spending time with a person is when they have been unloving to us. So, we have no levels of control whatsoever. And anybody who comes to visit us pretty much sees that. But if you look at what the media does, the word cult has a connotation. So it's not just a statement of truth for the media. It's actually a way to give an impression to a reader. Does that make sense? So it's a purposeful manipulation of the truth. A judgment is like this, a purposeful manipulation of truth to inflame an emotion in the reader in this case. For example, in many newspaper articles, I'm referred to as Miller, right? In other words, I don't even have the respect enough of the person who's writing the article to use my first name. I'm never usually called Mr. Miller or Mr. Alan John Miller or whatever, but rather I'm just called Miller, and this is another judgment coming out of them. So the statement of my name is just a statement of truth. Yeah. My last name happens to be Miller, right? Yeah. But the attitude coming out of them is, I do not deserve any form of respect, which is how they feel. And that's how they treat me when they interview me, and that's exactly how they feel. And so the emotion coming out of them is an emotion of judgment coming out of them. And it helps a person maintain their own arrogance, their own position. It helps them maintain the feeling that they are superior. So they feel then the right to pull down another. So the people that we've met in the media thus far, and I'm not saying that all people in the media are potentially like that, but we haven't met anybody that isn't at this point, but they have this strong desire to pull down all the time. And in fact we see this happening with other people all the time. And then of course they write these big articles pulling down something, but when they're proven to be false and they've been sued or something like that for being false, they write this little tiny correction in the 28th page of the paper that nobody can see, yes, when they spent the whole front page pulling down the person. And this is an indication of their underlying desire. Their underlying desire is, one, to judge, but not to tell the truth. And a person who has a desire to tell the truth would tell the truth whether they were happy about the truth or not.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So if a person came and examined our lives, they'd see that we don't rip people off, we don't impose our feelings upon them, we don't do any of those things. And while they personally might be unhappy about that, because it makes their story a lot less flamboyant and a lot less inflammatory, they would still be happy to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And the reality is that's what judgment does. Judgment helps us avoid the truth. Mm-hmm. Judgment is a great way to step away from truth, to get away with actions that are very, very damaging to society and individuals, just because we want to maintain a position of falsehood most of the time.
Right, because my next question was what makes us judge, not just judge others, but judge ourselves? I see many people have an issue with judgment and criticism of self. So what drives us to this injury?
Well, as for all of these injuries, most of them began in our childhood in some way. Mm-hmm. So, and it can be a combination of things that gathered in our childhood that caused us to begin to judge others. Sometimes a family has this perception that their family is the best family. Mm-hmm. And then because they maintain this perception with their children, they actually inculcate into their children this concept that our family is better than any other family, and our beliefs are better than anybody else's beliefs, and the way we live our life is better than the way anybody else lives their life. That makes us better people, mm-hmm. right? There's this underlying feeling that is present. Now, this underlying feeling builds in the child, and they begin to then act upon this underlying feeling that they are better than other people. And, of course, they will not avoid judging other people as a result. Mm-hmm. The other thing that causes judgment is almost the entire opposite set of circumstances in our childhood, mm-hmm. which is a set of circumstances where other people have judged us in our childhood and criticised us and pulled us down and denigrated us and treated us badly. And then this causes us to have sort of like this rebellious attitude towards their judgment by judging them in return, by having a kickback reaction to their judgment. And so we grow up actually judging the things that are inside of ourselves as a result. In addition, in our childhood, we were often judged whenever we expressed an emotion. Mm-hmm. So whenever we expressed an emotion that was out of harmony with the family or society viewpoint that was surrounding us at the time, we are immediately attacked. And so judgment actually comes from a large degree of fear inside of us about attack, personal attack upon ourselves. When we are attacking another, we get away from being attacked ourselves. And if we, as a group, attack another, mm-hmm. we have a large degree of acceptance in the group mm-hmm. towards ourselves not being attacked. Mm-hmm. And so often judgment comes from a deep underlying fear of actually our own attack, our own lack of safety, our own lack of security. Mm. Yeah. Mm. And you see this happening all the time in the world too, where eventually judgment turns into war, eventually. Yeah. And all through the Dark Ages, judgment turned into religious persecution, for example. Because eventually they turned around into this viewpoint that because I now judged you, I could now condemn you. Mm. So it's like I could now mete out justice, what I believed was my form of justice towards you. Mm. So if you happen to be speaking to spirits and I heard you and I was a religious persecutor at the time, I would have condemned you as a witch and given you, one way to test it. Mm-hmm. And the way would end up in your death if you were innocent, and if you weren't innocent, you'd be killed anyway. Mm. Not very much of a choice, no. But that would be the judgment that I met out. So once we actually get involved in judging another, we actually also get involved in condemning another, and it's not very far from that before we will begin murdering others, where we'll actually be involved in harming physically other people.
Quite sobering.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, I suppose what we need to do is look at how it relates to humility.
That's my next
the whole reason why we're doing this is we are avoiding our own feelings about others attacking us. And we're avoiding our own feelings of superiority that we have over other people. And we're, in the end, avoiding our own feelings of how lesser we feel, our own sense of worth. And so there's so many emotions that we're avoiding and getting away with just by judging somebody.
Yeah. All right, final question on this block. How does judgment relate to our seeing and speaking truth?
Well, fear and truth are complete polar opposites. So fear is false expectations masquerading as truth, right? Or you could say false expectations appearing real. They are masquerading as truth. And truth is completely opposite. Truth is divine truth, absolute, unable to be modified. Now, judgment is a fear-based emotion. So while I'm in a state of maintaining a fear-based emotion, it's impossible for me to see truth. So this is what judgment also causes us to do. It causes us to not be able to see truth. So it's very, very damaging. Now, if we think about our relationship with God, we've got humility as the foundation of our relationship with God. Humility opens the door to truth. So if we're judging, we're closing the door to truth. So we might be praying to God like, please give me more love. But while I'm judging my fellow man, I said in the first century, you might as well grab, a noose and put it around your neck and attach it to a great big heavy weight and throw it in the sea, because that's really what you're doing. You're killing yourself in terms of your own relationship with God. That's what you're doing by judging another person. You are actually causing the other person harm, but in addition, you're causing your own soul to close to any truth. And when you cause your own soul to close to any truth, how can love ever enter? So if humility is the doorway to truth and truth is the doorway to love, then we were not even getting to the point of the truth when we're in a state of judgment. We're already telling ourselves the lie. And so it's impossible for new truth to enter us and impossible for God's love to enter us while we're judging our fellow man and woman, of course. So judgment helps us avoid our own fear. It helps us stay away from the truth about how we feel, and it helps us avoid the personal responsibility for our own emotional response to what is happening. It helps us avoid all of those things. So it's like it's anti-humility. This judgment. We notice, as you and I talk about frequently, we notice many people who think they're on the divine love path judging other people so much. They have these terrible feelings that they feel towards people in the community or in the environment, and this is an indication of how much they do not understand the principles of humility. Because if they understood the principles of humility, they'd be looking at themselves and going, wow, I just judged another person. Wow, I just judged another person. Wow, every time I'm judging these other persons, I am completely shut down to the truth. Completely. And I see many people supposedly speaking truth, and yet they're in a state of judgment. Exactly.
And as we've just described,
so they are totally shut down to truth.
Completely closed.
Exactly.
And what I find so sombering about judgment is the, as you pointed out, is the quick progression into violence that can happen from judgment. Yeah. And
well, you were in your first century life. You were, many of the so-called friends that we have, because of their judgment of you, treated you very badly, both while I was alive, but even worse when I passed. And many of those people, acted like they were all loving. But you put them in a negative situation, immediately they resort to violence, and so much violence that they're prepared to even kill a person generally, or rape them, and lots of other very unloving acts come from this underlying condition of judgment. So, for instance, men who judge women as being a slut or a whore will often revert to the rape of the same kind of a woman. Just because their emotion of judgment causes them to eventually revert to violence.
To justify that situation.
To justify it, yeah.
Okay, thanks, babe. All right.